Thank you, Jeremy. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the August Marketing Mindshare. For those of you who are new, our mission for this group, the focus for this group is to inspire excellence in communication and marketing and to encourage collaboration between businesses, organizations, and individuals. We started this group at the beginning of the year, totally not expecting that basically all but one of our meetings would be virtual. But I am happy to say that I think so far have had a really good time this year, even though everything's been virtual along these lines, and especially encouraging that collaboration while everyone's trying to figure out what to do with their marketing. And our vision, the way that we're specifically building that mission is through this. It's a community of success-minded marketers that through education, like the presentations, and collaboration expands the capacity of all of our members to achieve great things for the benefit of our area. So we just have a couple announcements before we get into the presentation. The virtual networking, I know that some of you are still continuing on with that, so thank you for continuing to do that. So if you want to network with anyone who is in the meeting, and I highly encourage you to continue those connections going, continue getting to know people. Sometime during the meeting, private message one person, exchange emails, find a time to connect and collaborate. If you feel comfortable doing it in person, then having a socially distanced lunch or coffee date or something like that. Otherwise, using video call or phone call. And we also have two other resources to help everyone stay in touch. We have the Facebook group. If you just search on Facebook for TVRC Marketing Mindshare, you can click join group, and one of us will approve you to join. And then you can also add your contact info to a spreadsheet where we have a running list of everyone's information. And those links to both the Facebook group and the contact info spreadsheet will be sent to your email after the meeting's over. And the second announcement, we have speakers lined up for the rest of the year, for the rest of 2020. But we are starting to get the ball rolling and planning ahead for the first quarter of 2021. So if there's anything in particular that you'd like to learn about, any topics, any marketing tactics, any marketing strategies, anything of that nature, let me know and we can get that in the lineup. Also, if you have any other ideas of things we could add to the Mindshare to even further support that vision and that mission that we have for this group, just let me know. You can either let me know through the feedback form, which the link to that will be sent to your email as well, or you can send me an email address and my email address here. And I think that's all. That's all the announcements for today. So today I am happy to say that Emily Berner, if you don't know her, she's amazing. Emily Berner is she works with the Alumni Relations Department at Shenandoah University, but she has her doctorate in crisis communication. And so we asked her, and she was happy to volunteer to present to us, kind of branching off from some of the things we talked about last month about COVID in particular, the pandemic response in particular, and how that affected people's marketing. But taking a broader look at crisis communication and how to prepare and respond so that you're ready when the next crisis hits your business. So with that, Emily, I'm going to turn stuff over to you. Go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
All right.
And I also recommend you put it on speaker view so you can.
Speaker view. Okay, yeah, I'm on speaker view, and I've never officially shared a PowerPoint on a Zoom. So how this works. All right. So there's. Okay. Can you guys see my PowerPoint?
Yep.
All right. Let me see if I can make it full screen. We good?
Perfect. Yep. Looks awesome.
All right. So crisis communication, how to prepare and respond. This is an interesting topic. As Rebecca mentioned, I do have my doctorate from Shenandoah in organizational leadership, and my dissertation was about crisis communication. And so I got my master's from Syracuse and moved here to Winchester, worked at the TV station for a while, and was a reporter and a producer, and decided that that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I hopped on over here to Shenandoah and have been here ever since. And for a number of years, I served as the spokesperson for the university, working with the media, doing all of our internal and external communication. It was a great experience, had a lot of fun with that. And so, again, with my dissertation focused on crisis communications, I actually interviewed 6 former college or university presidents and asked them about a crisis that they had gone through during their tenure. Just kind of asked them to lay it all out for me, how it all went down, and then specifically the communications process, how that worked or didn't work, takeaways from that. And then obviously, I mean, we haven't had any major crises at Shenandoah since I've been here, but we've had had to put out fires here and there. And so I do have some experience in dealing with stuff like that. So my operational definition of a crisis that I always go to, a crisis is a major occurrence with a potentially negative outcome affecting an organization as well as its public services, products, and or good name. So in short, organizations should expect crisis to occur and be ready to manage opinions and expectations of your key stakeholder groups before, during, and after a crisis occurs. So I won't bog you down too much in the theoretical stuff, but I did want to mention a few things because I think they are important. So when we're talking about the theoretical underpinnings of crisis communication, one major thing we have to think about is information dissemination in times of crisis. So again, you want to be communicating both internally and externally. So, your staff members, anyone who's working in your organization, you want to make sure that you're communicating the most important information to them. They may be getting questions externally. You may or may not want them to be answering those questions, but you at least want your internal audience to be informed on what's going on, how you're responding, what they should or should not be doing in terms of the communications process at that point in time. And then externally, obviously, you're going to have your key crisis team, whether that's 2 people, whether that's 5 people. Obviously, it depends on how large your organization is. But you will have a key group that's obviously making the decisions about the crisis, and then you have the group or 1 or 2 people who are then taking that information and deciding, okay, what's most important, what can we say to our external stakeholders, and what will we say. Obviously, you want a smooth transfer of information so that you can maintain your reputation and credibility. So make sure when you are going to say something, you know exactly what you're going to say. You have your talking points. You have all the information organized so that you're doing it smoothly and maintaining that credibility. And then just an important point to note, and I think everyone knows this, communications shape public perceptions of a crisis and the organization involved in the crisis. So it's very important to make sure your communications are ready and communicate exactly what you want to communicate to your internal and external audiences. Some information descriptors, various authors have written about the type, how you want your information to be. So you want it to be consistent, honest, accurate, credible, open, prompt, clear, and precise. So not too many things. That's okay, not too many things to think about there. And then university specific, but applicable to all. You want to obviously make sure your communication lines are open between your decision makers, so that when you then take that information and communicate it out, that everyone's kind of on the same page. And then what we'll talk about a little bit more is extensive planning, preparation, and training. And then in terms of image restoration theory, there's 2 key assumptions behind that. Communication is best conceptualized as a goal-directed activity, so it's intentional. So you always want to have a purpose behind your communication. It's not just a rush to get as much information out as you can and try to put out the fire as quickly as you can. It's intentional. What do you want to communicate? How will that affect your internal and external audiences? And then maintaining a positive reputation is one of the central goals of the image restoration theory. And one thing it's important to note is whether the audience actually disapproves and believes the actor is responsible beside the point. So as long as you're perceived to be at fault, you've got to employ that image restoration strategy. So there are a couple different strategies that you can employ, and it just depends on your crisis and what you're dealing with as to which one you employ. So there's denial. It didn't happen. This isn't actually happening. I don't think you see that very often, but hey, it may happen. Evading responsibility. So, well, it happened, but it wasn't our fault. Reducing offensiveness. So it happened, but it really wasn't that bad. Corrective action. It happened, and we're fixing the problem. And then mortification. We are responsible, and we're sorry. So those are the kind of types of image restoration theory and strategies that employ. All right, survey says, so like I said, I spoke to a couple college presidents, 6 to be exact, and there's some quotes up on the screen. So, you know, these really speak to, number one, a crisis can happen at any time. And it usually happens at the most inopportune time. So you want to make sure that you're trying to do as much planning ahead as you can, because it's probably going to happen, and it's probably going to happen at not a great time. And then you also, I love this quote, I don't care what my grandmother thinks about the university, but you do care about what your alumni think and what your parents think and what your on-campus community thinks. So you must focus on who is your most important audience. Is it your customers and clients? You should know your customer and client base well and get a sense of what they feel is important, especially as it relates to your company and organization. So that's going to give you good insight on how you react to a crisis and how you communicate about it. So depending on the crisis, you may think, oh, well, our customers don't really care. You know, that's an internal thing. It's really just trying to get a handle on what you're going through, and will your customers, your client base, your internal community, really any of your key stakeholders, will they care about it? And then what do you need to say about it? Okay, so I love this. When I found out about it, it wasn't supposed to be a crisis. So sometimes it's not a crisis until it's a crisis. You really need to be nimble in situations and try to think ahead. So if you have a situation, you're like, this might blow up a little bit, you might want to go ahead and be prepared for it to blow up, just in case it does. And then the bottom line is, I love this one as well, the bottom line is, don't worry about anybody else's rules. If you think it's time to talk to the media and you've got a story to tell, you better tell it, or someone else makes up a story to fill in the blank spaces. You always want to make sure that you're not allowing other people to tell your story. If it is something that's either hitting the media or social media or something you know people are talking about, you want to try to at least get out as much information as you can to fill in the blanks, or at least have a statement so that other people aren't saying, well, I heard this, well, I heard this. No, direct everyone to your Facebook page or your website. Here's our statement on the situation. Okay, so best practices. So pre-planning is imperative. I want to encourage you to think about the different types of crises that your organization might encounter. Obviously, the crises that we encounter here at Shenandoah University are very different from, you know, a law firm issue or a marketing firm issue or a bank or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you really take time to think about, okay, what are some of the things that might go wrong, and how would we need to communicate about those? Have discussions with your leadership and key staff members about this. Maybe even create a roundtable exercise to talk through the full process you would take during a crisis. So again, thinking about internal and external communication. What are your communication vehicles or channels? Do you have an email database? Do you have cell phone numbers so you text your clients on occasion? You have social media channels. Is there direct outreach that you can do to customers and clients via phone calls or visits? Can you identify your top 20 clients? Man, we really need to get to them and make a phone call and have a personal conversation about what's going on, and confirm with them that everything's going to be fine, and give them as many details as you can without being too transparent. I think there's also a balance. You can you want to be transparent in the situation, but also, especially if there are legal implications, sometimes you just can't say everything. And then in terms of the databases that drive your communication vehicles and channels, are they up to date? Do you have the most up to date email addresses for your clients? Do you have the most up to date cell phone numbers that you could text them or give them a call? You want to make sure that your clients and customers are easily accessible at a moment's notice if you have to communicate something right away. And you obviously just need to know what you're going to say, who you're going to say it to, and how you're going to communicate that message. What is your statement? What is your talking points? So when you've identified potential crises that you may encounter, I would also encourage you to do some research. How have other organizations traversed these types of crises? What did they do well? And what could they or you improve upon if you ever find yourself in that situation? And then I'm kind of obsessive on being organized and planning ahead. So, I would also encourage you, once you have those crises identified and a good idea of how you might traverse them, you want to create templates and language for all of those communication vehicles and channels for each type of crisis you may encounter, and a strategy of how you're going to communicate and to whom. Again, who's your most important audience or audiences, because then you've got the playbook. We have an emergency operations plan here at Shenandoah. If we have a hurricane, if there's a train derailment, there's all sorts of emergency operations plans within that procedural manual. And then I took it a step further and created a communications emergency plan of, okay, where are we going to create our newsroom? Where are we going to do our briefings from if we have a full-scale something or other? I don't know that you necessarily have to go that in depth, but I think having some templates and a good idea of what you may say in a certain instance and who you need to say it to is very important. And again, coming back to those principles that I mentioned before when we were talking about image restoration theory, you should be consistent, honest, accurate, credible, open, prompt, clear, and concise. And one thing I would encourage is, once you have your statement, you want to stick to it. Only use talking points that are generated from whatever statement you've created about the crisis. You want to make sure that statement speaks for itself. So if you have a situation and you think, okay, here's our statement, we're ready to go, you email it out to clients and customers, you put it on your Facebook page, you put it on your website, and then you get a call from the Winchester Star. You get a call from, hopefully not one of the DC television stations that wants to come out and cover this. And they're asking you all these questions. Direct them back to your statement, or have pre-planned talking points that come back to your statement and reinforce that information, so that you're not off the cuff creating new information and new answers. You really want to, whatever you're able to release and whatever you put in that statement, you want to continue to go back to that. There's even been times where I haven't answered any extra questions from the media. They've inquired and I've said, I have a statement that, President Tracy Fitzsimmons sent out to our campus community. You may have seen it already, but here's a copy, and you can consider this our official statement, and you can quote from it. So I've also been able to handle situations that way where, again, I'm not answering any additional questions. I'm not creating any new talking points. I'm just saying, here's our statement. Feel free to use whatever parts of it you want, but consider this the official information and the only thing we are going to officially release. You may also want to consider identifying and training a spokesperson for your organization if you haven't already. And then also be sure that daily you're monitoring your social media news outlets. Keep an ear to the ground about what folks are saying about your organization. I still have the Google alerts that I set up from when I was the spokesperson for the university. I've got Google alerts for Shenandoah University, Shenandoah College, Shenandoah Conservatory, all the different ways that people could possibly refer to our organization, and a couple extra search terms. I just, pop those into Google alerts, and then you can automatically have any mentions of you out on the web. Now, it won't be exhaustive. And I don't think it, is exhaustive of social media and comments that are made on social media, but you may be surprised some of the mentions that you get if you check in with Google alerts and create those. And then in terms of just keeping reputation and perception in mind, again, I think back to the quote, I don't care what my grandmother thinks about the university, but you do care about what your alumni think, what your parents and on-campus community think. So just making sure you know what's going to be your image restoration strategy. Are you going to deny that something happened? You may have to do that. Are you going to say, no, that wasn't our fault, it wasn't that bad, yeah, we're fixing the problem, or yeah, we're responsible, we're really sorry, this is how we're going to remedy the situation. And then after you get through all of that and you're on the other side and you can take a deep breath, you take time to debrief and discuss learning opportunities. So you want to discuss key learning outcomes and takeaways with your team after the fact. They definitely could help you in the next crisis. Hopefully you won't have the next one. So again, just to conclude, and I'd be happy to take any questions after this and talk through some other things, but crises are going to occur, whether they're small ones, whether they're big ones, whether they're medium ones. You're going to have something that you're going to have to respond to. So the crisis communications process will always be needed to ensure that an organization's stakeholder groups are informed about the crisis and its implications. And then it's important to reflect on the crisis situations that your organizations may encounter and begin to plan for how you may react to a similar situation at your organization. Again, research other crises that have happened and what are the good and not so good takeaways from what other organizations have done. And while you can't plan for every specific instance, if you've got preparation, prudence, and postmortems, they're the key to navigating and surviving the crisis communications process. So I will try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. I don't know, Rebecca, if you have any suggestions for that.
Yeah, there should be a little, so where it says you're sharing your screen. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Good deal. Yeah, happy to take any questions. I'll check the chat to see if anyone popped anything in there. No, it doesn't look like it. You have any questions for me?
Yes, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them. Oh, there's a couple in the chat.
Should the statements be written by the leadership team or the marketer? I prefer that the marketer writes the statements. I think maybe the leadership can do a first blush and say, hey, like, here are the things we really, really want to communicate. But you would also hope that your leadership trusts you to then maybe push back on a few things. I don't think we can release that information, or did you think about saying it in a different way? I think the marketing team should hopefully have the last word or the semi-last word on what you're going to say. You're the marketing professional. You know your audience. You know the important things to say to them and what they hold dear. So yes, I would say it's a combination, but hopefully the marketing team would be able to get their advice in there and really be heard on what the best course of action is in terms of a statement. Did the Google alerts come to you by email? Yes. I set them up long ago, so I haven't set up a Google alert in a long time, but if you just Google Alert, you should be able to connect it to have it come to your email account. And like I said, I get, probably 10 Google alerts to my email each day. There also used to be something called TalkWalker alerts that I had signed up for. I haven't seen those come through in a while, so that company might not have not exist anymore, but those were always helpful. Do you ever just ignore a situation and hope it goes away? I would say it's tough. It's really tough. There may be some situations for which you cannot release any information, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to know all the legal. So there may be some situations where there's a legal issue and you've retained a lawyer and you can't say anything. And that then probably would be your statement. Hey, we realize, folks are asking us about something currently going on within our organization. Unfortunately, at this time, because of legal action, we are unable to release any details, but we hope you'll continue to stick with us. Something simple like that. Yeah, that's a tough one. There very well may be a situation that you can ignore, but that I think would be very few and far between. Let's see. How does freedom of speech come into play? That's an interesting question. Danita, do you want to expand on that in terms of freedom of speech, like for someone to be saying something about your organization that you have to respond to? Is that? Yes. Okay. So, yeah, that's a tough one, and I'm definitely not an expert in the freedom of speech area. I will say that if someone is, for example, making a comment on your social media channels and coming to you and saying, I heard XYZ, a lot of times what you want to do is maybe make a short statement there, but then also try to take the conversation offline. That's the biggest thing, is especially in the social media sphere. Now, if someone's posting on their own page and then people start jumping in and saying all this stuff, we try, you know, if anyone did that about Shenandoah, we wouldn't necessarily go to their page and start answering stuff. Or it's really just if it's on your social media channel, you want to try to answer that right there, nip it in the bud, take the conversation, like I said, offline, reach out to that person, personal message them, hey, I'd love to talk about any grievances you have, you know, let's chat. I really want to get to the bottom of this kind of thing. But yeah, if it's someone just kind of spouting off on their own pages, on their own, that is a challenge. I mean, that might be a situation where you try to ignore it. And then if it gets a groundswell, you may have to make a statement that says something like, you know, there's been some, you know, mentions of XYZ. We want you to know that these accusations are categorically false, and we have full, you know, full confidence in the employee that's being bad. We probably don't want to mention the employee's name, but we have full confidence that we are doing the right thing in the community. And if you have any questions or would like to discuss any issues you may have with us further, please contact so-and-so and either provide a phone number or an email address. I find that's really helpful, especially when we have alumni who aren't happy for one reason or another with Shenandoah. And we get an email into our generic email account, and one of my staff members forwards it to me. I get in our database, I find their cell phone number, and I call them right away and say, hey, we got your email, let's talk. I want to know what's going on, what can I do to make the situation better? So again, taking that conversation offline. I think people also really just appreciate the ability to be heard. There are a lot of things that alumni come to me about, and I can't do anything about it. But I can at least be a person to listen to them and say, hey, I will take those concerns. I will send them up the flagpole. I will do everything I can to make the situation better. Sometimes you can't do anything, but I think people just at some point in time just want to be heard. So especially for those social media people spouting off, you know, try to, you know, even if they're spouting off on their page, maybe try to still personal message them and say, hey, I know you may have an issue with us. Is this something I can help you with? Let's talk. Let's set up a call. All right, let's see. Please speak to less or more regarding content. Yeah, I think that just depends on the situation. I am a less is more kind of person. The challenge with that is that if you don't give enough information, there's still going to be questions and concerns that are going to come out. So it's hard to strike that balance with, here's what's going on, here are a few things we can add about it, and then here's how we're remedying the situation. And again, even if you put that sentence in there saying, you know, if you have any questions, please reach out to so-and-so. And then if someone does reach out, whether it's a member of the media or someone who feels, you know, a grievance based on what's happened, that allows you, again, to at least have the conversation offline, direct them to someone who may be able to help with the situation, or if it's the media, you're back to your talking points that come from the statement. Not giving them a runaround, but I think, you know, a lot of times when I've worked with the media and they said, you know, hey, what's going on with that residence hall situation? We heard you had to move 200 people into the hotel because of mold. Well, no, it was a moisture issue. Let's use the right M word. It was a moisture issue. There was no mold yet, but we're trying to prevent that. And actually, here's the statement that Tracy sent to all those students who were relocated the other day. Let me send that to you, and you can use that and quote that as much as you want. So again, making sure you have that statement solid, and continuing to come back to it. But yeah, it is a challenge to kind of figure out how much do you want to say. I'm always a less is more. Don't overshare too much. I think people get too much into the transparency. I mean, you want to be transparent to a certain extent, but I think people, and they really don't understand anymore because everyone knows everything about everything at this point in time. But you know, it's hard to be fully transparent. It's just impossible. Not everyone can know everything about a situation in the organization. It's just impossible. Yeah, proponent of tell your own story or someone else will tell their version. Absolutely. So, and you may even find yourself, if it's been 24 hours since the crisis started and you haven't made a statement yet, that's a problem. You want to make sure you get something out as soon as possible. But if it's a little more technical, a little more challenging to get that nuanced statement, you can make a pre-statement and basically a holding statement and say, there's something going on. We're going to have a statement at, 5 o'clock today. Come back to our website, come back to our Facebook page. We'll have a full statement for you. Or our CEO is going to do a quick Facebook Live and say something about it. I mean, that's also a great option. You can really do your own press conference on Facebook Live. If it is an extended crisis where you're going to have to deal with it for the next couple of days or weeks, it might be good to have a couple statements that you release here and there. If it's a huge thing, and I'm trying to think, like if you think about the Virginia Tech shooting, obviously that was a huge thing for Virginia Tech. Media descended upon the campus. And so that's an instance where you would say to the media, okay, we're going to have a briefing for you every hour on the hour. I, Emily, am the spokesperson. I'm going to be coming out to that podium over there every hour on the hour to give you an update. Even if I don't have any information, I come out and say, hey, I don't have any information to update you right now, but come back in an hour, we'll talk about XYZ. So always trying to, if it's going to be something that's prolonged and you're going to have drips and drabs of information coming out, you always want to be clear of, this is where I'm going to be at this time. It doesn't have to be every hour. We're going to be here at noon every day. Come to our Facebook page, and at noon, we're going to do a live broadcast for half an hour and answer questions or make a statement. So that's the other thing is, even if you can't tell your story right away, you can tell people that the story's coming so that they're hearing from you, because complete silence is not a good thing.
Awesome. That was fantastic, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let's do it.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the discussion now.